Well, when I was in seminary, the first time, our president of our seminary was Chuck Swindoll. Many of you are familiar with Pastor Swindoll, who's kind of a grandfatherly figure. At least he served that way for us while we were in seminary. He was speaking chapel regularly, and sometimes he would come to chapel and he would just kind of put the Bible aside and just say, I'm just going to give you some practical wisdom from an older man that's lived this life and been in ministry for a long time. And I appreciated those times. I mean, it was simple things like wash your car sometimes. As you're getting ready for ministry, people don't want to go into a pastor's car that's dirty, right? It doesn't reflect well. So simple things like that. Well, I was, several years ago, Pastor Swindoll had written an article and talked about some ways to avoid some natural tendencies that dads make. So I thought I would share some of his and tweak them a little bit for our purposes today. The first tendency that he talks about with dads is that dads have a natural tendency to give things instead of giving ourselves. Our presence, our personal involvement. And when I think about that, it strikes a chord with me, because the reality is I like to give things to my kids. There's something gratifying about giving things to my kids. My kids over here on the right, 2 of the 3. And the real temptation that I find is to focus in on getting those things instead of spending time. Do we give our toys to give them toys, or do we give them time? Swindoll states it this way. He says, nothing takes the place of a father who gets involved. Nothing. That's why I'm so encouraged when I look out here today and I see so many dads that have taken the time to be here. Now, I recognize that there are several dads that couldn't be here. That's just the reality of life. Some are out of town on business and you just conflict of schedule. But it's encouraging to see so many that are here. Dads, continue to take the time. Be in the bleachers during games. Be in the audience during music performances. Be by your child's side when they're struggling in their homework and they need a dad's advice. Now, students, let me give you a word of caution here, or a word of advice. Recognize that your fathers have a lot of pressure on them. They want to provide the best for you. And just because your dad's not at every event doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Be compassionate towards your dads as well. First temptation, to give things instead of giving ourselves. The second tendency is to save our best for the workplace. And as I think about that, I think about Philippians chapter 2, and I'll just read it briefly. Philippians 2, Paul, writing from prison, Paul says, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. And then he says this, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interest, but also to the interests of others. Dads, we're called to do nothing from selfish conceit. We're called to think of others' interests and not only ourselves. And our tendency, truth be told, is to spend a lot of our time in the workplace. That's a natural tendency for us, to give our very best in the workplace, and then when we come home, we're kind of zapped out of energy. I'll confess, I'm that way, right? I struggle with that. And I'm finding it's taking some purposeful resolve for me to think about, I can't give all of my energy here. I need to leave some for when I get home. Swindoll states it this way. He says, nobody has an endless supply of emotional energy, creativity, enthusiasm, ideas, humor, leadership, drive, and a zest for life. How easy it is for dads to use up all of those things at work, leaving virtually nothing for the end of the day. As a result, the wife and kids get only the leftovers. What a stark thought, right? We save our leftovers for, some of us for the meals the next day, others for, used to be in the old days, leftovers were for the dogs, right? Well, if we think about leftovers in the context of time, are we giving our families our leftovers? Fathers, let's not just give our leftovers. Let's resolve to coming home, to not just being listless when we come home and just watching TV only, to not being negative when we come home, being mad all the time, to not being boring when we come home, and not being predictable by just laying around the house. Now, students, let me encourage you as well. Philippians 2:3-4 also applies to you. Your dads, I think, will appreciate me telling you this, but the world does not revolve around you. We love you. We love you. But the world still is going around when we're not with you. And there are still responsibilities that we have. And as we are challenged to not look out for our own interests, but also look out for your interests, that's reciprocal. You're called to not only think about your own interests, but to think about others' interests as well. And that includes your dad's. Recognize that he may need some space when he comes home. That he can't talk to you every moment of the day as soon as he walks in, and he may need an hour break before he starts doing anything. Think about your dads. He's not Superman. Third tendency, to deliver lectures rather than earning respect and listening and learning. Dads, do we not have that tendency? To want to lecture all the time, to correct? James 1:19 is worth considering. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. How often do we first get mad, then we shout, and then last we listen? Right? We reverse James's whole model there. Remember, we were created with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Let's practice and resist the tendency to always just want to give instruction. Deliver lectures. Lecture 38, lecture 39, lecture 40, and the week is just beginning. Students, remember that you are called to honor your father and mother, both Ephesians 6, Ephesians 7, so that when your dad is instructing, that you need to listen because you're called to honor. And your dads, when they're giving you those lectures, will save you from a wealth of pain. The fourth tendency, to demand perfection from those under our roof. I love baseball. This was the worst season for me as a baseball fan because my team is the dead last team in Major League Baseball. I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan. And I think we're up to 110 losses. It's a terrible year. But one of the things that I love about baseball is that, this year's batting champ, I think will bat right around, I think last I saw, he's right in the upper 340s. He's batting about 348 or something like that. He will finish the year as a batting champ, batting 348. For you, those of you that are not baseball fans, what that means is that he doesn't get a hit every time he gets up to the plate. In fact, less than half of the time he gets up to the plate, he gets a hit. I think Ted Williams was the last hitter to hit over 400. That means for every 10 times he gets up, 4 times he gets a hit. Baseball doesn't demand perfection. It's impossible to be perfect in baseball. We make errors. We hit the ball where the opponents are. In fact, if you were to hit 350 over a long enough period of time, you will get enshrined in what's in the Hall of Fame. If baseball players don't have to be perfect, our kids don't either. We cannot demand perfection. And it's easy for us to demand perfection. And dads, as we demand perfection, Ephesians 6:4 says we tend to exasperate our children. And he says, dads, fathers, do not exasperate your children. By doing so, you create a sense of anger in them. An exasperated kid is one who can't jump high enough, can't get a high enough grade on his report card or on his test, has a demanding father who thinks he's coaching all the time, always raising the bar. While we should have high standards, we cannot demand perfection. Now, students, while perfection is not possible, obedience is. Obey your parents. Last but not least is the tendency to underestimate the importance of your cultivating your family's spiritual appetite. I'm going to say that again. Dads, we have a tendency to underestimate the importance of cultivating our family's spiritual appetite. Our kids are longing for it. Your wife is longing for it. You're expected to lead your family. You are called to lead your family in spiritual matters. And that role is vital. Do not underestimate the role that you have in being the spiritual leader in your home. Children love knowing that their dad loves God, walks with God, and talks with God. Ultimately, what is caught is more important than what is taught. Again, our tendency is to teach, to give lectures, to give lessons. But what your students see you doing, what's caught by when they wake up and they see you in the scriptures, or when they see you loving your wife, or they see whatever the situation may be, that is what they're learning. They're learning from you, from your day-to-day life, the integrity of that which you have. This is why Moses in Deuteronomy 6, on the heels of leading the Israelites into the promised land, he tells the Israelites, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might." And then in verse 6, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." In the daily activities of life, when you're sitting, when you're rising, when you're walking along the way, you are teaching your children. What you're teaching them is caught more than just taught. So, as I think about these 5 tendencies, I think about the reality that we fail. We fail regularly. And some of us maybe haven't even taken our roles seriously yet. And I guess my challenge would be, why not start today? Here we are on a Friday, September 28th, 2018. Why not allow this weekend to be a self-assessment period where we get to self-assess how we're doing as dads? And have some honest conversations with our children about how are we doing as dads? And spending some quality time with our children this weekend. Why not start today?